The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello again, this is Ralph Boehm giving you a legislative update. We had a busy week this week, doing a lot of bills. We have 103 bills in education, and we finished about 1/3 of them that are going to the House floor this coming Wednesday and Thursday for everybody to vote on. We will be in Manchester again. Hopefully this will be the last time. They're still working on the Reps Hall. But anyway, just a quickie on the redistricting. The Senate will be voting on the redistricting on some of the bills on Wednesday also. On the House redistricting, in other words, our reps, like we're with Hudson for 2 floterials and 2 in Litchfield and 4 in Hudson. Though that didn't change. There's some minor changes they did mainly up in the North Country with some small towns, which what I understand we're all agreeable with. But they haven't touched the congressional districts yet, and they haven't voted on their New Hampshire Senate districts. So hopefully we'll see what happens there in the next few weeks. But right now we'll go to my bill I'm putting in on default budget. My testimony I gave to municipal and county. You know, if you looked at your budget for the last, I don't know how many years, the default budget is always somehow higher than the operating budget. The intent of the law was never supposed to be that way. So anyway, here's my testimony on that bill, and here we go. I'm Ralph Boehm, Hillsborough District 20, Town of Litchfield. And I've passed out testimony to everybody. And the reason for the municipal official ballot law was that town did not have a facility big enough to hold regular town or school district meetings. One town that I know of had meetings in multiple locations with TV hookup between locations. Even that was not enough. So this law came into being, allowing everyone the opportunity to vote. This bill is common sense. If the governing body reduces something in their proposed operating budget, in other words, the selectmen or school board, they must make the same reductions in the default. When this law was first passed in 1995, the default budgets were always lower than the proposed operating budget. But after a while, certain associations and lawyers figured out a way by using the wording of the law to manipulate the default budget to make it higher than the operating budget, to assure that the budget will pass. But that was not the intent of the law. If you read the section 4013, Roman 11-C, the wording of the second session ballot question concerning the operating budget shall be as follows. And if you read it, and should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be, which is the same, but then it says, or the governing body may hold one special meeting in accordance with 4013, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of revived operating budget only. So you can see the intent was the default would be lower. If the default was higher, then why would this be in the law if the article was defeated? What governing body would ask for a special meeting if they got more money? What school districts are doing to follow the law is, for example, not needing 3 teachers. They are removed from the proposed operating budget, but left in the default. If the teacher's contract says they will fund clubs and sports stipends for a total of $20K, but never spent more than $15, you guessed it, the proposed operating budget will be $15, but the default will be $20. On the town side, if every other year the town buys 2 police cruisers, but then one the next year, the year with the one will have 2 in the default, et cetera, et cetera. For example, this year in my school district, the proposed operating budget is $23,766,000, while the default is $24,184,000. How do you think the people will vote? Also, the vote, luckily, this, I can say luckily, but we had the snowstorm Friday, so this was moved. We had a deliberative session last Saturday, and sure enough, the school board did not recommend this budget. 5-0 against it. Of course, they want it to fail so they get more money with the default, which was not the intent of the law. Also, I was just looking at the proposed bill, and for example, on line 23, the RSA 197 thing was crossed out. That should not have been. I don't know how I missed that. But anyway, but I'll available for any questions.
Any questions for the representative from the committee?
Okay, thank you. That was my testimony, and I mean, you can always go like streaming what I showed you in here. If you have more time, listening to what the municipal association said about it. The person that was giving her testimony didn't know what she was talking about. She was talking about one-time item. No, one-time items are not in the default. So, and they're the ones pushing for, let's fix it, so, and the school board association, so we'll never have a budget that won't pass. Now, a lot of towns, they're following the intent. The default is lower. For example, in Hudson, the default's lower, and other towns also. And then one of the vice chair of the municipal county, he told me, yeah, look, he had their deliberative session. Sure enough, their default was higher. So we have a problem. Merrimack has the same problem we have. So I think we need this to go through. Hopefully, it will pass the committee. And then pass the House. Problem is, with cities, everybody is not a people don't know what SB2 is, which is why I tried to explain it. But anyway, we have a lot of issues going on this week coming up. If you remember saying in the House Education Committee, which I'm on, we have 103 bills this year. Okay. This coming 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be voting on 33 of those bills. So, hey, we're making progress. And a lot of other bills. So I'll try to go through some of the bills that we'll be working on. And if you, this is, here, for example, first we have the consent calendar. Now, the consent calendar is, we have 26 bills on our consent calendar on education. And I didn't count them all, but you can see there are a lot of bills on it. And a lot of them are inexpedient to legislate. In other words, they're bills that we don't recommend passing. Now, the consent calendar works like this. For all those bills, maybe 100 or so on the consent calendar, it just takes one vote. Okay? Any one rep, though, can pull a bill off the consent calendar so it'll be voted on separately. And that's usually done at the end of the 2 days. So if the thing is, and the speaker said, only those bills that are early bills. An early bill is a bill that's going to a second committee. In other words, like a bill that's going to need money. So it'll go to finance or ways and means to get that money. That's the second committee. But if it's not an early bill, then we'll wait until we'll vote on that again sometime in March, probably. So I'll go through some of the bills. For example, House Bill 1058, relative to the time allowed for public school students to eat lunch. Now, that's a lot of issues in that. That sounds good to start with, but now what do we do? Lengthen the school day? Spend more money in the cafeteria to give more time? There's a lot of issues in here that, contract issues and everything. So it sounds good, and people putting in, that sounds good, but that's ITL. The next bill, inexpedient letters, 1074, example, relative to notice to a chartered public school for special education services. Now, that's simple. That's what to pass. We have a little amendment. For example, your resident school district is responsible for special education, no matter where the student is. If the student is in a charter school, if the student in the private school, or the student, in some cases, in jail. Okay, your resident school district is responsible. But this bill here allows the charter school to be be part of the IEP for that student. So they're the ones teaching that student, so they should have input on what the IEP should be. That was a good bill. 1125, school emergency plans. That puts still classified information. You might say not everybody knows your school emergency plans, but they can be filed with Homeland Security, Emergency Management, for example. Also, your police and fire know what those emergency plans are. So that was also a good bill. And then requiring public schools to teach labor history. Inexpedient to legislate. When I went to school, we learned that. I mean, it's, oh yeah, schools should know, schools should know that, people should know it, and if they're not being taught it, that's not, we take it upon thing, it's not our job to tell the DOE what they have to teach. Also, 1193, relative to chartered public school fees and enrollment. We found out that some charter schools, charter schools run on a lottery. In other words, you want to go to this charter school and they have X number of openings, they'll pick your name out of a hat. The problem with that, they were also leaving it, one of the charter schools was charging a fee for out-of-state students. And maybe some instead we didn't, but we said, no, you can't do that. And in-state students have preference over out-of-state students. Yes, if you have 50 openings and you only have 49 people in-state, yes, you can take one out-of-stater. But the point is, no, you can't charge any fees for that. So that was an ought to pass. Okay, and last year we passed a bill, HB 1202, which is my amendment to that. That was a bill to allow charter carriers, like Trailways and all that, show my age. Anyway, and other buses to take students on long trips or to the airport. For example, a good example came out, Londonderry Marching Band used to go all over, and they'll probably start doing that again. They've done inaugurations, they've done the Rose Bowl and whatnot. And the bill that passed last year had a mileage limitation of 150 miles round trip. It's only like maybe 50 miles to Logan Airport from Londonderry and here. So I put in the bill an amendment to take out that mileage limitation. So that was an ought to pass. 17-1, there's always somebody. Okay, and some other ones. Here's one. Establish a committee to study school meal programs in the Hampshire Public Schools and that accept public funds. And that was a refer from interim study. So we're interim studying a study. That was the joke we were doing. Yes, it needs to be studied because there's a lot of issues with should schools be forced to have breakfast. It's a lot of most schools in New Hampshire now also offer breakfast, and then lunch, but then some schools don't. But then, how do you fix that? Sometimes it'll cost money. You have the additional people. Who's going to pay for that? So that's what the study is. You can't, and we pretty much it's a constitutional issue if we say you have to. Schools can do it on their own, but if the state says you have to, then the state's supposed to pay for it, and we know that doesn't always work sometimes, but that's what the Constitution is, but sometimes people don't do it. Okay, 1234, relative to criminal background checks for an application for a teaching credential. This was added, for a list of offenses were added. Prevent credentialing as a teacher in New Hampshire as an actual extension of the law. The problem with that is like I mentioned, I think I mentioned this last time, it also keeps the background check also for credentialing. So also that we also got a committee going on that, also to come up with a committee, because one of the problems is we need to work with the Department of Safety, the FBI, and whatnot on the background checks. For example, the Department of Safety can only go get the FBI for certain things, and that's federal law and whatnot. So we're looking for a committee to tie those together, so if one place, Department of Safety, said, no, you can't, that one doesn't work, you gotta let the DOE work, know about it. In other words, if that offense is on it. So there's some way of bringing all that together so you can do one background check and get all the information. Okay, so that's a bill on that. One bill is allowing for school districts, budgets, and warrant articles include cost per student information. That was inexpedient legislate. The problem with that is every school district in the state comes up with ways of how to figure out how much the cost of education is. Now, my simple way is you take the budget, you take the number of students divided in, and that's what I call. But this bill wanted it to be on every warrant. So, for example, this year we have a warrant article for the middle school. Now, do I divide all the students into that, or just the middle school students in that? But then when it becomes part of the budget, how we do that. So it's kind of hard because you can that way compare town to town or town. But the point is, if not everybody's doing it the same way, comparisons don't work. Okay. I think I brought this last time. Prohibiting persons charged with or convicted of certain assault or controlled drug possessions to not be allowed to teach. Okay. I mean, how many years has this been going on? Relative to lead in school drinking water. I mean, I thought we'd been killing this forever. I mean, what happened, I remember a couple of years ago, they had a news article about a school in Nashua was tested high for lead. Yeah, it was before, with the water sitting in the drinking fountain all summer, and then they test it. No, you have to wait. But, so this bill was, it was ought to pass, because there's a deadline on federal money coming in, and it's till just another few years. And it'll be you start in January and go to June, and it's testing drinking fountains and all that. Where water is drunk or in the kitchen, don't have to test the bathroom faucets or whatnot as drinking fountains or in the kitchen, and those tested. All the schools will have that problem because you still have the copper pipes soldered together with lead, okay, and that lead leaches out. But most of the newer schools don't. It's tin and antimony instead of lead, okay. Transportation, 1453. There were a couple of these. Transportation to a chartered public school. Now, somebody put in, I mean, the problem is you got to get chartered schools. They're public schools to work together. Everybody works together. But resident schools, if you're, like Manchester has 5 chartered schools in Manchester, in the city. They provide bus transportation to those chartered schools. And that's law, because we also got to provide bus transportation to private schools. I mean, everybody pays property taxes. So this bill was, you can't have a place where you can drop students off and then they take another bus like to the chartered school. I mean, with 5 charter schools in Manchester, you know, this bill was, you have to take the student directly to the charter school. I mean, if there's 5 charter schools in Manchester, how are you going to do that? Plus, they also have all these private schools in Manchester that they have to bus transport to. So they do what we used to do many years ago when we were providing transportation to St. Francis. We would leave it then. St. Francis said, no, we don't want that anymore. We don't want to mess with our schedule. So this kid was dropped off at the middle school, I believe, and then transported from one, and then another bus just went to St. Francis. So that's what this bill was. No, we don't want that. We said direct. I mean, that was ridiculous. So 18-0 to kill that one. One thing mainly for us, our use,
requiring the Department of Education to provide the House and Senate standing committees with written copies of the laws relative to education. That happened because last year we didn't get it. We always got in this book. The education book is the biggest one with all the laws, so we can easily go through it. Yeah, we can do it on the computer. The problem with the computer, laws on the computer, they're not annotated, which means they don't have any legal court cases or anything on that, so it's bad. But the regular book has all the laws and any lawsuits and whatnot that occurred from it. So we got the books, so we'll be still getting them, because one of the arguments was, we don't know if we can get a publisher. Come on, you can always get a publisher. 1561, another one relative to school nutrition standards. Inexpedient to legislate. I mean, we know what happened some years ago when Michelle Obama came out with the thing and kids weren't eating the lunch, they were throwing it away. And this would have happened the same thing. Yeah. So, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and kids aren't going to eat the food, and we all know how that works. I mean, it's not like at home. You're not going to leave that table until you finish your supper. You know, it doesn't work that way in school. So you can't force the kids to eat what they're not going to eat. So, yeah, you can give nutrition food, but make it so they'll eat it. Yeah, anyway, how far do we want to go? Okay, okay, here's one, tuition in the university system. We passed the law some years ago about if you had children of a disabled veteran, they wouldn't have to pay tuition. And this, we added to that, if that veteran also died, then the children of that veteran then get the free tuition, which is only fair. Okay, here's one too, requiring high school students to complete a half-year required course in Introduction to Philosophy. Hello? Yeah, it was an interim study, but it's one of those interim studies which let's be nice to the person put in the bill. It's philosophy should be in all the classes. It's how to do something, how to learn something. It should be taught in everything, and you know, and that kind of thing. It's not. And what philosophy? I mean, come on. So yeah, that'll die a nice death. Okay. Relative natural immunity system, health and wellness curriculum in schools. Another one. We don't teach curriculum. We don't. When we said this years and years ago, we don't mandate curriculum. That we mandate. We got to pay for something. But okay. And one here we got to study is relative to making incentive grants for school districts that improve in certain assessment scores. This is the opposite of what's being done now, and I think it should be. But it's an interim study, so we'll study it and then maybe come up with a bill next year. For example, right now, if your school has got bad third grade reading, you get more money. So we're paying for bad behavior. Now, but shouldn't it be the other way? If your school has got higher math scores above a certain percentile, you'll get more money. Then you got an incentive there. But anyway, we're interim studying that. Okay. Again, then some other bills going on down the line. 1657 Farm to School, I covered that one. If you go through a lot of one, relative, here's one in environment and agriculture. Relative to milk pasteurization, this bill updates the current statute to include ice cream and frozen yogurt in the products that can be made from raw milk. A lot of time, I mean, we passed this some years ago where you can get raw milk. If you can go right to the farm, dairy farm, and you can get raw milk. Or, you know, some people like it and whatnot. I mean, every baby drinks raw milk. Anyway. And then some stuff, if you want to go through this on, 1574, here's one for PFOAs in soil. So there's one, the bill came from a brainstorming meeting with Merrimack. I'm on that commission, on the PFOAs, and this is for soil. So this ought to pass with amendment. So they're looking at to see if soil is contaminated with PFOAs. Another bill relative to recycling of beverage containers. How many times we've done this over the years? Refurbishment study. So for looking at establishment of a beverage department redemption program. I thought we took care of this 50 years ago. I mean, there were more recycling done in New Hampshire without a deposit than the surrounding states. Okay. And you can go through all these, and there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Let's just jump to, and that's the consent calendar. Those are the bills. Now, if we go through the regular calendar, and we got some education bills, see how many on the consent? So here we go through a regular calendar. Okay. And here we got some education bills too. Relative to the source of funds for education freedom account, this was one where there's the people trying to attack education freedom accounts by doing away with the funds and whatnot. And so, and just want to make a thing on that. On EFAs, because I had this argument with somebody at the deliberative session, your school does not lose any money unless the student from your school goes to another school. Then the state wouldn't get that money anyway, because the money the state gives the school is based on the attendance of students going to that school. Now, one of the arguments is what the school's losing money because not all those kids going to EFAs are from your school. The school's not going to lose any money. There's amount set by law on what each school gets for each student that attends a school. So they're not losing any money. So watch out for those ads. So this was one bill that does it. Now, one quickie on another bill here on the CTE, Career Tech Education. One of the bills were put in. I'm on a committee on that. We're looking to make sure that the schools align their calendars. In other words, Litchfield should align their calendar with Hudson, so people don't miss out on their career tech education courses. So that's going around for the whole state to do, and hopefully we wanted 5, but making it 10, and they'll bring it down. So with that, we'll find out in a couple of weeks. Hopefully I'll have Erica Leon in to cover some things on a bill that she put in on on home education students, not EFA students that don't take any state money to home educate the students. So we'll cover that in a couple of weeks, and thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.